First of all, when we're talking about these two, we got to really understand that they were both absolute geniuses in the comic book industry. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, fantastic. And this is in no way going to be any kind of a dig at Stan Lee. I think Stan Lee's place in the comic book industry is solidified. I think it's important. So there you go. But I am much more of a fan of Jack Kirby. Much, much more of a fan of Jack Kirby. So that means I'm a little bit biased in this argument, okay? I'm a little bit biased. I will always try to find, this is my confirmation bias, and I try to break out of this at times, but this is my thing, is I am more on Kirby's side, okay? For those of you who do know or don't know, there's a whole thing, and it's been going on for decades. Jack Kirby versus Stan Lee. Who did what? Who's more responsible? Who deserves the credit? And what it all kind of comes out of is that Stan Lee became a big name, a very popular figure. Most people in the comic book industry know Stan Lee so much, they think Stan Lee created everything popular in comics, which is not the case. Or they think he created the entire Marvel Universe on his own. Not the case. Not the case. Not the case. But we all know that. But Stan Lee was a mastermind at promotion, definitely self-promotion. Now, I'm not blaming him for that. That's fine. I don't hate on Stan Lee. He's super talented. He was a great spokesman for Marvel. He is not the greatest comic book writer of all time. Okay? He is not. Okay? But the discussion last night was about this. He was going on about DC being a shady company. And he was using as an illustration DC's treatment of Alan Moore over The Watchmen. Okay? No, Roger, we don't overlook Ditko, nor Ramita, nor Buscema, nor anybody else who over the next 50 years, right? And 80, if you want to go all the way back to the Golden Age, the Marvel Universe is created by hundreds of people that are responsible for that, right? Stan Lee, though, gets a lot of the credit, okay? And he gets a lot of credit because he deserves a lot of credit. But let's talk about Jack Kirby. So, the idea was that DC is a shady company because of their treatment of Alan Moore over The Watchmen. My response was, DC and Marvel are both shady as F. They're shady as fuck. They're both corporate entities. They're shady as hell. They will always take their bottom line dollar, whatever. They're over creators. Creator rights don't exist at DC and Marvel. It's just not the way it works. There's a reason why there are legal battles in these companies over creators and their estates, okay? Because copyright law means that after a certain amount of time, creator rights go back to the creator. Creator-owned, creator rights versus corporate rights, and that's a whole different thing. He's very accurate in what he's saying. These people sign contract, it's work for hire, right? That's basically what he was saying. Because he said, Marvel's not as shady as DC. And he was like, give me an example. And I said, Lee and Marvel about Kirby and Ditko. Like their treatment of Kirby and Ditko and other of their creators, especially Kirby and Ditko, though. Like Kirby and Ditko are as responsible for the Marvel Universe as Stan Lee is. Now, Stan Lee is that promoter. Stan Lee was the face. That's a big deal. I'm the face of PCP. There's a whole lot more that going on behind the scenes that y'all don't see. Holshoe runs the website. You know? Goldsmith and Drew are always on the podcast. Drew hooks us up with movies that we need to see. If we need to watch a bunch of movies to get ready for a podcast, Drew is there. He gathers up the movies. He gets them. He handles that. Hooks all of the rest of us up. All that kind of stuff, right? So, but to me, it's absolutely ridiculous to say that Marvel is not shady towards creators like Kirby and Ditko, but to say that DC is to Alan Moore and Watchmen. Alan Moore signed the damn contract. The contract states if DC has the book go out of print for like a year or something like that, right? If the book is out of print, the rights will revert back to Moore and Gibbons. Well, DC hasn't kept the book out of print. Is that is that bad of DC to keep the Watchmen in print? Has that not helped make Alan Moore's name? Now, I love Alan Moore. I love Alan Moore. I love him so much. He's a great creator. But Jesus Christ, don't sit here and say that DC is shady to Alan Moore, but Marvel was never shady. Stan Lee was never shady to Jack Kirby. Are you fucking kidding me? Of course he was. That's like 100%. Who did what? That's a completely different argument. Both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, along with creators like Steve Ditko and others, were responsible for the Marvel Universe. That's fine. That's fine. We all know that as comic book fans today. But to say that Marvel's not a shady company? Are you serious? The real villain of the entire Stan Lee versus Jack Kirby thing, and yeah, let's not forget Ditko and others, right? But the whole villain of this is Mark Goodman. Mark Goodman was the guy who owned Marvel, who ran Marvel. He was the shady one. Stan Lee did whatever he could to stay in his good graces, and he did. Now, here's the thing. We could argue that Stan Lee should have done more for Jack Kirby. I agree. Stan Lee should have done more to stand up for Jack Kirby, but he didn't. He didn't because he was looking out for himself. Is there anything wrong with that? You may think so morally, but legally, no, not at all, right? And he wanted to bring up the court cases. All right, well, let's bring up the fucking court cases. Okay, so in 2000 and, oh God, did I write this down? In 2004, was it for 2009? So copyright law, right? Okay, and I'm ranting, y'all. I'm ranting. Copyright law. The rights were about to revert back to the original creators. Okay. The whole point of this is to point out that DC is that Marvel is just as shady as DC. So the copyright was about to go back to the original creators. Well, is Jack Kirby a creator of Fantastic Four? Is Jack Kirby a creator of the Hulk? Is Jack Kirby a creator of Thor, Silver Surfer, Iron Man, Galactus, X-Men, Captain America? Well, for sure, Captain America. And I even brought up this. I said that, oh, you're bringing up Alan Moore? Well, look what Alan Moore says. Alan Moore says, Stan Lee, great promoter, terrible person towards fellow creators. And he cited that in the Son of Origins book, Stan Lee even alluded to the idea that he may have helped create Captain America, but just didn't really remember it. And that's something that Stan Lee used to do all the time, okay? Stan Lee would, this is why I'm wearing the Teen Dog shades. Stan Lee would be like, well, I don't remember who did what. That was his way to be able to take more credit, okay? Stan Lee was a self-promoter, and he was also a promoter for Marvel, and he was a big deal. Without Stan Lee, Marvel would not exist the way it is. Hands down. Even if you had Kirby and Ditko and Ramita and Bashima and everybody else, right? You had all those people. Larry Lieber even. If you had all those people, right? Without Stan Lee, Marvel would not be what Marvel was. It was Stan Lee that really helped elevate Marvel up, right? He was hip. He was cool. He was the face. He made it work. Nothing wrong with Stan Lee for that. But he never stood up for creators' rights. Never, ever. And he would even allude to the idea that he did create things. Now, here's the thing. Alan Moore was incorrect. I did my research last night on the stream. I even mentioned it last night on the stream. It was not stated in Son of Origins that he possibly was the creator of Captain America. He did say some erroneous shit, though, in that book. Read it. Read the book. Read what Stan Lee says about the creatorship of Marvel Comics and certain characters, and just just read it. Read it, and then read some actual reports from real comic book journalism, not just top 5 lists and shit, but real comic book journalism. I'm talking about read fucking Morrow's book, Kirby versus Lee Stuff Said, which all the book does is lay out quotes from Lee and Kirby and their partners and other people in a chronological order. Kirby was saying the same shit in 1990 that he was saying in 1965. Now, 1965 is when the falling apart happened. Kirby claimed that he was more involved in the creation of the stories of these books than Stan Lee was, and he wanted something out of it. Stan Lee was moving himself up into the organization. He was the editor. He was the editor-in-chief. He has the final word on who got credit for what. And if you look back at those days, words by Stan Lee, art by Jack Kirby, right? Who did what? Well, they both did it. But here's these are facts, y'all. The Marvel way of writing comic books. I'm going to rant for a minute. The Marvel way of writing comic books was this. I think Goodman was his uncle. There are claims of nepotism in that, but all that aside, however Stan Lee got the job, I don't know if there's any good comic book journalism books on Audible. I need to look into that, actually. I really do. But regardless of how he got his job, Lee is essential and integral to the success of Marvel. What's up, Ethan? How are you doing? Happy birthday, buddy. Happy fucking birthday. Everybody tell Ethan Jones happy birthday. So, Stan always took full writing credit. This is the Marvel way of doing things back in the 60s. Stan Lee would maybe come up and be like, how about if we did this? Here's a good example. The Galactus trilogy, okay? Here are facts. These are real things. These are real fucking things that exist in the reality of the world. It's not just conspiracy theory bullshit or nothing. This is real shit. So Stan Lee tells Jack Kirby, hey, what if in the next story of Fantastic Four, they go up against God? That was literally Stan Lee's contribution to the initial Galactus story. That was literally it. What if the Fantastic Four went up against God? In fact, so much so, it's like they know you guys are like trying to disguise your curse words. So much so that when Stan got the pages, he goes, who's this surfer dude? So who created Silver Surfer? Right? Well, they both did, right? Because what would happen is that Stan would give a vague idea about what he wanted to do. Jack would take that and fucking create it. Now, artists do more than just draw. Like, they create a lot, right? It's a big deal. But nowadays, people work on full script for the most part. But the Marvel plot way, the plot first way that was really kind of elevated by Stan Lee was, what if the Fantastic Four went up against God? And then Jack Kirby brings up the entire artwork for Fantastic Four 48, and Stan goes in and fills in the dialogue. In fact, Jack Kirby, in the margins of his original artwork, would be describing the story to Stan and have suggested dialogue. Okay? All right? Do you not believe me? Well, I got some actual pages here. Look at that. That's an original artwork page from Jack Kirby. It's inked, and it's got the lettering on it, but look at the margins. Those are notes to let Stan Lee know what the fuck is happening. There, right there. You see the suggested dialogue placement and the suggested dialogue at the bottom by Jack Kirby? That's Jack Kirby's handwriting, by the way. He yells, grab something, Johnny. Hold on fast. I'm going to open the sealed door to the negative zone. Now, Stan Lee would usually ignore this, right? He would ignore the suggested dialogue. Nobody's arguing that Stan Lee didn't write those words, though I do think Larry Lieber wrote a lot of those words. But look at the suggestions. Why does Kirby have to write in the margin what the story is to Stan Lee? It's because Stan Lee would give him a vague idea, Kirby would do it, and then Stan would have to have notes to be like, oh, this. And also, Stan Lee was a busy person. I'm not hating on Stan Lee. I'm not elevating Jack Kirby over Stan Lee. They were both friends. They were both geniuses. They both worked together to create the Marvel Universe, along with other creators like Steve Ditko, John Buscema, Larry Lieber, and more. So I'm not hating on Stan Lee. Goodman was the villain of the piece. Stan knew how to work with Goodman. Stan was able to promote himself and make himself a very viable part of the industry. Should Jack Kirby had fought more for those rights? Yeah, maybe he should have. Jack Kirby's old school, though. You got to realize Jack Kirby's older than Stan Lee. Jack Kirby believed, if I put my head down, if I do the work, they will reward me. In 65, started getting a little fishy. He started making some rumblings. Well, it didn't work. And in 1970, he left Marvel over it. Before him, Steve Ditko left. Steve Ditko left and never looked back. Steve Ditko, you could argue, had that principle. Well, F you, I won't do what you tell me, I'm done. Right? Jack had a family. Steve Ditko didn't. He wasn't able to do that. In fact, Steve Ditko was trying to convince Kirby to leave with him. Kirby almost did. Kirby had a family, yo. He had a wife. He had kids. This was an old school dude, okay? If it ever really got heated, by the way, Jack Kirby would have totally wiped the floor with Stan Lee. Who knows? I've never heard a story about them actually getting in a physical fight, but that'd be funny, right? But anyway, the credit goes to all of them. But here's the thing. Stan Lee's shady. Stan Lee's shady as fuck. Marvel's shady as fuck to these people. Jack Kirby was only ever trying to get the recognition of being a co-creator. People are like, well, Stan always did it. No. Stan never, ever in his life admitted that Steve Ditko was the co-creator of Spider-Man. He would say things like, in my estimation. He would do these weird things where legally he wouldn't be actually saying that Steve Ditko was a co-creator or that Jack Kirby was a co-creator. Now, Lee did at times give the credit, right? He did. Nobody's saying that. I'm not saying that Stan Lee just was like some kind of like an evil, terrible person that was trying to steal Kirby's work or Ditko's work or anybody else. I'm not saying that. I do think he got his brother Larry to ghostwrite a lot of his scripts, though. I'm pretty sure. But that's just speculation. Who gives a shit, right? But he never fought for Kirby. And there's an interview that Kirby did on the radio. It was like on his 80th birthday or something, maybe a different birthday, but I think it was in 1989 or 1990 or something. The whole thing's on YouTube. And he's talking about it. He's talking about, I wrote those stories. Now, he also made some claims. He claimed to have been involved in the creation of Spider-Man. And from what we can actually tell, he did definitely draw the first image of Spider-Man we ever saw, which was Amazing Fantasy number 15, the cover. But his idea for Spider-Man was way different than what Lee and Ditko came up with. Spider-Man is Lee and Ditko. It's more them and less Kirby, okay? So there is that, right? But if you look at that book by John Morrow, I think it's like Stan and Jack or Lee and Kirby or Kirby and Lee, stuff said, something like that. It's literally just quotes of them in chronological order. Kirby didn't really change his story too much. Stan Lee did. Early days, he didn't really remember. Yeah, we both did it. And later on, he's like, oh, I did it. And so he was taking credit. Okay, the Alan Moore thing, what he was talking about was at the time, that was when that Captain America movie, that really shitty Captain America movie with the Italian Red Skull, I think, was about to come out. The movie poster and I think the movie itself gives Stan Lee creatorship of Captain America. And Stan Lee was part of that PR campaign. He was part of that. He was actually there making sure, right? So he's implicit in that just a little bit. So that, I think, is where Alan Moore was getting the idea that he alluded to the idea that he may have created Captain America, which we know is not true. That's Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. I don't know if we lost some people, but I'm just frantic. It all is to say this. It's obvious that Kirby helped write those books, okay? Lee never gave him that credit. If you look at that interview, it's Kirby's birthday. And he's talking about, oh yeah, I really helped contribute to a lot of this stuff. Stan Lee calls in and has a conversation and denies that Kirby ever had any kind of thing. And you never wrote a word. Sorry, Jack, you didn't. You never wrote a word. You didn't do it. You weren't the writer. I was. You weren't the writer. Come on, man. Come on, Skip. Come on, man. That's cold. You're going to call up on this radio show when they're celebrating the life and the legacy of this man who's it's his birthday, and you're going to call in there in particular to argue with him over who did what? Come on. We know for a fact Jack Kirby was a big part in creating those stories. Not X-Men. X-Men was X-Men was Lee's baby. The most pure Kirby you're going to get is Fantastic Four and Thor. That was his stuff. In fact, he got so tired of his ideas not being respected on Thor that he held all of his ideas back, and years later, when he went over to DC, he did the New Gods. And that's what that was. Now, I'll tell you this. Look at Kirby's 70s DC work, New Gods, Forever People. I love it. I think it's my favorite, right? I think my favorite is Fantastic Four. It doesn't have the flair that Stan Lee gave the Marvel books. Lee is essential. Kirby is essential. Lee never went out of his way to give that credit to Kirby or Ditko or anything else. They are just as important, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about Stan Lee because it's a complicated world, but Kirby deserved the credit, and he never got that. Not in his lifetime. Now, there was the lawsuit, because we wanted to bring up the lawsuit. So in 2009, Kirby Estate, like, hey, the rights are about to revert back to us, right? Because we're co-creators. We got to prove this, right? And one of the things he said last night was, yeah, they get credit. They got credit. They get credit. Read a comic book today. Yeah, read a comic book today, and it will say Fantastic Four created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. It didn't say that till 2014. You know why? So this is why. Because the Kirby Estate was suing Marvel because Kirby is a co-creator of basically the Marvel Universe, right? And they were like, well, with copyright law, we're about to have a stake in this again, right? And all Kirby wanted, Kirby didn't want fame. Kirby didn't want, notoriety. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was such a far-off dream by the time Kirby died in 94, right? All Kirby wanted was his family to be taken care of. If I'm responsible for this, if I'm partly responsible, I want my family to be taken care of, just like Stan's family is going to be taken care of. That eventually happened. This is what happened. They kept suing, and you wanted to bring up the court cases. Well, they kept losing. Yeah, they did, but this is what happened. They kept moving those court cases up. They would lose one, and they'd move it up higher. They were about to hit the Supreme Court, okay? The Kirby Estate versus Marvel, whatever, was about to hit the Supreme Court. 2 days, I believe. I may be wrong on this, but I think it's 2 days before the Supreme Court was about to make the announcement on whether or not they were going to hear this case, which would be a landmark copyright law case. And in copyright law, don't trust corporations at all. Here's one of the reasons why. Well, Disney had just bought Marvel at that time. Y'all know, right? Disney's got a lot of money. But when it was about to hit the Supreme Court, basically, Disney goes, we don't want to be involved in a landmark, historical copyright law ruling from the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not saying that the Supreme Court was going to hear the case, but it was very likely that they were. Because this has a lot of implications about copyright law and creatorship, okay? Well, does Disney want, valid, good copyright and creatorship laws? Well, hell no. Disney wants to own up all the media that they can, right? And yeah, I'm a shill for Disney. I'll tell you what good Marvel comics and movies there are. I like Disney. I think Disney's fine. They do good product, right? They settled out of court. Part of that settlement was money, right? So Kirby finally got his wish well beyond his death. 20 years after his death, finally got fiscal compensation, monetary compensation for his family. And finally actually started getting creator credit in the comic books. Why did it take till 2014? Someone mentioned the Bill Finger stuff. Same thing with that. Why did it take so long to get that credit? Well, when maybe the Supreme Court's about to make a landmark decision on copyright law, it's better just go ahead and give him what he wanted the entire time, which was a little bit of financial compensation and full-on creatorship. Like, the books say that created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, Don Heck, right? It says this stuff now. At the expense of maybe, possibly, some major change in copyright law. Who knows? We'll never know at this point. It would have been a big case. And they got what they wanted, and they settled out of court. Anyway, to say that DC is shady to Alan Moore, but that Marvel is in no way shady to its creators, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's ignoring all sides of everything. That being said, corporate comics is bullshit for creators. You know? You'll make more money. You can possibly make more money there, but you won't own any of your shit. And you'll wind up like Marv Wolfman trying to get a lawsuit, being like, I never signed a work-for-hire contract when I created Blade. But it doesn't matter, especially now that Disney's behind them. The only thing that ever scared Disney when it came to Marvel was the Jack Kirby estate lawsuit. And they settled that. And they only got scared of that when it was possibly about to go to the Supreme Court. Anyway. So let's to wrap this up. Kirby and Lee are both equally responsible for the success of Marvel, along with people like Steve Ditko, John Buscema, Larry Lieber. Let's not leave Larry Lieber out of this conversation. That's Stan Lee's brother, who probably ghost wrote a lot of his scripts. But Lee and Kirby, man, if that relationship wouldn't have fallen apart, can you imagine? We wouldn't have gotten the New Gods, though. So at least we got the New Gods. Everything happens for a reason. Kirby, creative genius. Lee, marketing genius. Both were responsible for the success of the comic book industry. And once again, here are those pages. You can look this stuff up. These are notes that Kirby made explaining the story and suggesting dialogue to Stan Lee. These are pages from Fantastic Four, but there's many more. So there you go. There you go. I'm sure I missed some comments here.